repeating pattern that we're working with. First of all, make sure you got your swatches open up because everything that we do is going to be saved to your swatches palette. I'm going to make a new file, file and new, and we found out last class period, rather than, we're going to print it off on tabloid size paper, but if you look up on the overhead board, I want you to set yours up to be 10 inches by 7¼ inches. So when you set up your document on here, let it be 10 by 7¼ That way you can cut it out to the exact size beforehand. We'll say OK. And this will give me a document that's set up very much like this. OK. So let me show you the very basics of it. We need to start off with some sort of object, some sort of pattern, some sort of something. So I'm just going to grab my star tool and we'll do something very simple with it. I'll make it red. We'll place it in the center. Now if I wanted to repeat the star throughout the entire area, one thing I could do is just simply make several duplicates of it and then copy it all the way through. That would take a long time and it would be very difficult to change up if I wanted to change one of them. So instead, I'm going to make one star and go to Object, down to Pattern, and choose Make. And this is going to open up a pattern dialog box, and it'll look something like this. This will give me a preview of what it looks like. Two things to notice. First of all, I'm in a certain editing mode. And in this mode, I've got my box open, and I'm able to, once I'm finished, I need to either hit Done, save a copy, or just cancel out of it once I'm finished. So be aware that you're in a separate editing mode. And you also, of course, have the little Pattern Editor options box. So let's pull this down here. With this one, the default mode is just going to set everything up in a nice grid. And you can choose what kind of grid you want it to be. So the basic grid will look like this. Other types of grids are brick type grids. So if you've ever seen the bricks on the side of a building, they're offset a little bit. So with this one, this will offset the side pattern, either vertically or horizontally, up and down or side to side. The other type is a hexagonal type pattern. And this is what you would get if you were like a bee colony or a beehive. And so it's on each side, 6 sides of it. Let's go back to the basic grid that I'm working with. Down at the bottom, you can redecide the size or the height and width of it. And you can also see how many copies you want it to be. So I've got it 5 by 5. And you can change how dim you want it to be as well. So if you want to see what it looks like at 100%, this will show you that as well. I like to keep it dim just so I can see what I'm working with. So that's the basics of it. Here's how you can start editing and moving things around. First of all, if I just click on my object, I can move my object around, and of course it's not going to do very much. If I was to grab my direct selector and change up one of the points, or to move around other objects, you can see they all will change up as well. Here's the next thing. What if I wanted to space this out? I wanted to push these away and give them more room or even bring them in. If you want to edit the area that we're repeating, this is where this button comes in. By clicking on it, I'm able to move the blue box and space everything out and give it a lot more room. Now this will come in handy once we start adding more objects or choosing different types of alignment patterns to work with. Pretty cool? Very, very simple. So if I wanted that and I wanted to repeat that throughout, let's say I like that pattern. At the very top, if I wanted to save it, I can either save or I can hit Done. When I hit Done, check out what I have in my swatches palette. I now have a swatch saved as that new pattern that I created. If I gave it a name, it would be named that. So to apply this pattern to my page, I simply need to make an object, in this case a rectangle, and I'm going to change my fill color to be that pattern. So now it's being reused over and over again. Cool? Did I lose everybody? All right, so that's the basics. Let's get a little more complicated. What if I started adding multiple objects to it? And this is where your pattern editor may come in handy. So I'm going to choose, let's go with this one. I like that one. We'll copy it, paste it into here. You do need to make it the actual size that you want it to be, so I'm going to set it a little bit smaller. And let's maybe add something else to go with it. Oh, I like this. Let's do that. Copy it, paste it. I'll even group it. Play around with colors. You can play around with the transparency of it. So if you want something to have like a multiply overlay, where they're overlaying each other, or you can change up the opacity of something. Let's see. What would that look like? That's kind of cool in itself. See how it's got a kind of a double color overlay? Y'all go away, I'm having fun. I screened it. Sometimes you don't know what you get until you started playing around with it. I think multiply is going to be the best one for this one. Okay, so we'll work with this. Bigger? No. Okay, got it selected. Go to Object, Pattern, Make. This will show me what my pattern looks like. So I could go with that. I could change up what style I want it to be. Let's try a hexagonal type pattern. So now I've got something like this. If I wanted to spread it apart, choose this. And now I can change up my hexagon size. This will push those out as well. If I got it smaller, it would start to overlap one another. And so I would get something a little more along the lines like this. So playing around with just with that is kind of cool in itself. Let's give it a name. We'll call this B pattern. When you are done, we'll say done or save a copy. And now I've got the B pattern saved in my swatches palette that I can reuse from there. If you wanted to make your own patterns, let's make one out of an ellipse. I was doing this the other day. I'll do that, make a copy of it. And let's get rid of the bottom edge. Okay, so let's say I wanted to repeat that pattern over and over and over again. I'm even going to give it a fill color of white. Haha, there we go. Okay, that'll come in handy. Just a second. Got it selected. Object, Pattern, Make. Okay, so that's pretty boring by itself. Let's see if I can get it a little bit better. I'm going to offset it. Instead of offsetting it by half, I'm going to do it by a fourth. So now I'm starting to get a pattern like this, but I want it to overlap just a little bit. So I'm going to bring this down. Aha! Check out what's happening. See how the top is overlapping this one? I really want that to be behind this one. So the next thing to consider is how things are overlapping. And this is where these options come in handy. See how the top is overlapping? If I was to swap to the other one, it would look like this. And so now I'm getting a repeating kind of cloud or wave type pattern. Pretty neat. We'll call this wave.
I'm so mad.
And we'll hit done.
In my internship, I had to create a wrapping paper pattern.
There you go.
I did it by hand because I didn't know this.
One at a time. So this is why we're learning it. So if I wanted to make my own wrapping paper, apply that pattern, and now I've got that pattern reused over and over again.
Like
Yeah.
An hour.
In just a couple of little minutes.
Yeah.
The thing about this is you're playing around with it. You don't really know what you're going to get until you get it. Another thing you can do. So I'm going to make some more circles. Oop. Make sure my fill pattern. Yeah. Whatever's inside of it. That's the way it works. Is let's see here. I'll make it big so we can see it. Try to do geometric patterns. Sometimes these will give you some nice results that you weren't expecting. Let's make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to place these right on each edge. Now I've done this so I know what's gonna happen. Okay, so I've got circles on top of circles. Now I'm going to start playing around with how they interact with each other. The best tool to use is this tool called the Shape Builder. Shape Builder allows you to quickly fill in and create and subtract areas from your shape. So with it selected, Select that. I'm going to set my fill color. I'm just going to make it fill of white. And wherever I select inside of it, it will either fill it in. So if I wanted to fill in that area, or if I hold down the Option key, see how I've got a minus sign now? This will subtract away that area. So I can get rid of certain things, even the inside of it, so I can be left with something like that very, very quickly as well. Shape Builder is a wonderful new tool that came out with CS5, I think. Let's see what this will give us. So I've got it selected. Maybe I'll get rid of my stroke. There we go. Let's make a pattern out of that. We'll make it blue. Oops. A little bit smaller. Edit, pattern, make. So that's what I'm getting out of that particular pattern. Change up grid. Hexagonal is kind of cool. Let's go back to grid. We can push it away a little bit. So I get that kind of repeating pattern, a little bit boring. I can bring it in and overlap it, so I get that kind of pattern.
It's like a digital clock.
I know, yeah. And if I like that, we'll just hit save. And now I can reuse it over and over again as well from this one. So what you're going to do is make a pattern for your book. I'll show you one more once I'm finished up. That fits the end paper. May or may not work really well.
Dude, that's cool.
Yeah, very cool. Let me show you what the floral patterns look. Floral tends to work really well for older books, for wrapping paper. Copy it, paste it. Let's make this one red. I'll group it. Let's see. Copy it, paste this one. Maybe we'll put that right there and we'll make this one green. Okay, red and green. I'm even going to change up my blending mode. Instead of it being regular, I'm going to set my blending mode to multiply for each one of these. Normal, multiply. Shrink it down a little bit because it's going to be too big. Let's see what I got. Object, pattern, make. So I got something like that. Let's start overlapping it. Since it's set to multiply, they're going to blend in with each other. So I get this kind of pattern. Let's see what hex would look like. Ooh, that's kind of cool. If I wanted one side to overlap the other, remember this is where this will give you some different results. I think since they're both set to multiply, it's not going to show up too much. I'll keep it like that, just to move on. Let's say that's my pattern that I like. We'll hit done. Here's the final thing you need to be aware of when using patterns and changing them around. If I apply that pattern to here, so I've got it inside of a rectangle, inside of a square or whatever object. If I go to transform this, let's say I bring it in like this. Now all it's doing is it's cropping out the area. In other words, I can move this around and notice that my pattern stays in the same spot no matter where I place it, right? Well, what if I wanted to move my pattern around? I like the way it is, but I just want to put it over here. I need my pattern to transform with me. To get it to move, to get the pattern to transform, double click on your selection tool, pull up the options, and choose Transform Pattern checked off. With it checked off, now check out what happens. If I was to move it around, the pattern moves with it, right? If I was to scale it, if I was to pull down, notice my pattern also scales as well. So that can be both good and bad. If you start stretching it, you're going to start distorting it the way it is from there. Pretty cool? But I can also make it smaller if I needed it smaller as well. Awesome. All right. When you're finished, let's see, I'm going to print off both of these. I've got cardstock loaded up in the printer. And you'll need to print 2 copies of it. So file and print. This is also very important. Make sure your media size is set to tabloid. And it'll have larger area, but it'll print the entire size that you need from here. And you do need 2 copies of it. 1 for each side of your book. All cool? So I'll turn it back over to you, let y'all get started.